in its history, Pinehurst, number 2, has played incredibly difficult. It did in 2014. It has historically. Troy, if you want to share my screen, I've got the yardages and holes that it will play to for this week. A par 70, over 7,500 yards, Greg, but there's kind of a lot to unwrap here. You know, we're already hearing on Monday some of the pressers about how fast these greens are and how diabolical they are and how on the edge they are. I mean, this is potentially setting up for carnage again.
Yes. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, you're coming in with some really long clubs at times. I'm actually curious about how the distance is going to play, because when it's this firm and fast, the fairways are really fast too. Right. And I actually think without any rough, there are two grass cuts on this property, fairway cut and green cut. Right. There's no fringe. There's no surround, aprons, chipping aprons. It's 2 cuts of mow height, green and fairway, which is fascinating. But I do think, in a way, since it will be firm, it really brings in a lot of the shorter hitters as well. I think you lose some of that element of, well, if you're in the rough and you got club head speed, you got shorter clubs in, the ball carries farther, so the total distance is farther. A lot of that stuff we typically talk about in a U.S. Open goes away here at Pinehurst. I think that brings a lot more players into the mix. Also, Rick, when scores get closer to par, I also believe more players enter the mix with the potential to win.
On the spectrum of U.S. Open venues, or at least of recent years, winged foot kind of on one end of the spectrum. I think this course, number 2, on the other end of the spectrum, right? You talk about lack of rough. I mean, that if you're not playing out of the fairway, you are playing out of native area, sandy spots, wiregrass, which without even that first cut, balls will roll through into that stuff. It is not a thick 4 inches of rough Bryson strongest man prevails type of major championship.
Not at all. And when you miss fairways, I was talking to Troy a little bit about this beforehand. I think there are some pluses and minuses. So one of the things that happens is you have an opportunity for recovery. That would be a positive. So a missed fairway doesn't necessarily mean death, right? There's a chance that you'll be fine. There's a chance you're not. On the other end of the spectrum, one that I'm not sure how I feel about, and at this point, I'm not crazy about it. It is either you're fine and you can go for the green, or you're not and you're chipping out. And there's no decision. Like the rough brings in this decision. Can I get a 6-iron on this? If I do, is it going to jump? Is it going to come out dead? Do I need to club up or club down? A lot of those decisions are taken away. That being said, considering that to be a negative, it does fit in with the style of the golf course. Mm-hmm. Or you may have just a terrible angle. You may have no shot, right? This course was designed with the purpose of width, because in order to attack the greens, you had to come in from a certain spot. The challenge isn't necessarily the lie you're going to get like it is at, say, a winged foot. So that creates a very different, but still a very stern test, because it really ultimately all comes down to what happens on the greens.
Right. So just so that you can visualize what Greg is referring to, when you're missing the fairway, you can be in a sandy spot with kind of a bare lie, access to the back of the golf ball, no problems from there, or you are in a spot where these little wiregrass plants are either impeding your club or impeding the ball getting to the green. And it's kind of like one or the other. It's not like it's not like a video game, Greg, where you're in the rough. It's like an 80%, 80% power, or 70%. It's like 100% power or 0% power.
Yeah. I mean, you could end up in a bush.
Yeah.
Right. You could end up with taking it unplayable. And a very similar shot could end up with a perfectly clean swing, which is, it definitely brings in a mental challenge as well. which is not in the decision, but it's in the ability to handle the fact that, hey, I might get lucky, I might not. And just because I'm having a tough day off the tee, it doesn't mean I'm going to get penalized. I could be penalized severely. I could have a great day off the tee and be penalized severely. So there's a lot of elements of this setup, I think, bring in a lot more players in the field than we've seen in past US Opens.
We'd also be remiss if we didn't talk more about those greens, because they will play a huge story this week. You're going to hear the word turtleback greens. You're going to hear that repeatedly. The two words of the week: wiregrass and turtleback. Now, what that means, Greg, essentially they're 6,000 square feet on average. They're rather large, but effectively much smaller because everything is rolling off. We heard even the first or second press conference of the week, Wyndham Clark was saying about how much break you had to play. He said a couple of guys in his group had putted off the green between the speed, the undulation, and the way that they are complexed to create a lot of tricky situations.
Yes. I mean, you can get on some fine lines. And this is the reason why there doesn't need to be any fringe, because the edges of the green, if you think about what you saw at Muirfield Village, there's, let's take some of the false fronts that you have there. There's a green, and then there's fringe, and then there's an apron, and that all kind of rolls off. But the roll-off area doesn't start at the fringe. The roll-off area starts, in some cases, is near the middle of the green, right? And so there doesn't need to be this variety in the cut, because the ball will have enough momentum to roll through the little lip that you get from fairway cut to green cut. And that is a very interesting factor. It's also why angles become a rather important element in this. Where you get on the wrong side, you got to carry a bunker, a green becomes really shallow, and on the other side is simply just a fall off. And once it falls off, there's nothing to stop it.
Right.
And so you end up with difficult, very demanding, small areas to land your ball in on approach shots. And then the last thing, Rick, when you get into short game, you have a lot of options. You
Yes.
can use any club in your bag, assuming there's no bunker in your way or you're not in the bunker, which also brings a lot of different styles into play.
Martin Keimer notoriously used putter everywhere off the green. We saw during his Monday practice round, Tiger Woods was hitting everything in his bag except wedges, almost, and except putter. He was hitting a lot of 4-irons that he was just kind of spinning up there. Yeah, there is not one way to play this course, Greg. So that's why looking back at Winged Foot, and I use Winged Foot as an example because I think it's the other end of the spectrum, right? That leaderboard ended up being built from one specific type of golfer. This could be a wide variety of golfers between the luck off the tee and on the approach shot, the options of how to get to the green, the options of how to get from green side to on the green. It seems like there is going to be a lot of different guys who could get this done.
Wide open, completely wide open. And we've seen that before, right? You have Martin Keimer. I'm not sure there's a way to classify him as a player. Like, I don't know if you'd say, oh, well, it's certainly not like Henrik Stenson, who's also gotten in the mix here. Oh, great ball striker. Dustin Johnson, who has finished well here. Great ball striker, great driver of the golf ball. You look at a Michael Campbell, similar to Martin Keimer. I'm not sure how you'd classify him as a player as far as elite skill sets are concerned. You have a Phil Mickelson. You have an Eric Compton. You have a Ricky Fowler. You have a lot of variety in the types of players. Jason Gore. Get these guys getting in the mix come from all different styles of play, which is there's definitely an element of that is pretty darn cool. It makes our job a little tricky, a little challenging tonight because it is so wide open.